TFT is a game known for its variance. You are given different opportunities to try to build unique decks to try to create a board that will beat out the competition. Luck is a factor in this game, so it can be very difficult to try to one-trick a composition. Something that isn't really talked about a lot within the TFT scene. So when you're able to actually pull it off, something has to be up, especially if you are successfully able to consistently top 4 with the board. So how is it possible for a game of luck to be able to produce somebody who's able to consistently one-trick a composition? Well, in today's video, that's what we're going to try and figure out, because in today's video, we're actually going to delve into who I believe is probably the best one-tricker on the server. You probably know who I'm talking about if you are keeping up with recent events, especially with the whole TF shenanigans. But we're talking about today about none other than Milk Guy, Milk TFT. Now, if you don't know Milk at all, a really just brief history about this dude. Consistently top of the ladder in North America, consistently within the top 10 if he cares about the set. Usually he's able to hit rank 1. I can't remember a set where he hasn't at least hit it at least once. He was, I think, like the talk of the town back in like set 3. I didn't play back then, so I can't really confirm this or not, but from what I understand, he was like one of the best players in America, I think, especially in set 1 and 2. Again, I could be wrong, but from what I understand, that's his history in the game. So he has a very rich history inside of TFT, and currently, right now, sitting at a very comfortable 1570 LP. And you can even see exactly when in the match history through the LP graph, when he started to just one-trick and climb infinite, because he's been one-tricking nothing but TF reroll, going from 1495 LP all the way up to 1629, and then dropping down to 1570 when he accidentally took a 7th one-tricking his composition. Now, again, if you want to look into the match history here, you can just go on LOL Chess and you can find it. But again, it's literally TF every single game. He's ending every single game with TF. And you might go like, oh, he's just very lucky. Like, he just happened to keep finding TFs and keep finding to hit it. But this is quite a large sample size. You can't be hitting it every single game and expecting to win out, right? This is a little unique in the way that he's able to consistently pull this off, and not only be able to pull it off, but be able to keep winning with it. He's definitely doing something that a lot of people are not when it comes to one-trick compositions. And by the way, the reason why I said this guy is sort of like the one-trick god in my opinion is because this isn't the first time he's just known to do such a thing. It's not just because the comp is broken, he just chooses a very strong comp and then he one-tricks it basically on every single patch. Just to give you a little more context, back in set 9, he just 20-20'd Kaisa Yasuo challengers. He played it 20 games, 30% win rate, 80% top 4 rate. And just for a little extra context, this was not like a uniquely super strong board, and in fact, it wasn't even like incredibly strong. It was just strong for the patch, but it wasn't like broken like the way that TF reroll is. And if we actually go back into his match history back during set 9, I had to dig this up. This is page 13 on LOL Chess if you care. But if you go into his set 9 games, you can actually start to see like Kaisa Yasuo, 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 the one weird game of Yazir Lux, Kaisa Yasuo, Kaisa Yasuo, Kaisa Yasuo, all throughout basically the entirety of his match history. You can see 1 1 1 1 6 1 5 5 1 6 1 8. Like these are, even his losses are not even that bad. There's a 1/8, but even then the lowest one is a 6th, and he's just consistently climbing with it, right? So this isn't his first rodeo, right? He's able to one trick very well and very consistently basically every single game, and it's not just luck. The sample size is too large to just be luck. So what is he doing differently? Well, let's talk about it. So in today's video, we're gonna dive into it. And first, just very quick, you probably, when this video is coming out, you probably know what the TF comp is, right? I think everybody knows at this point. In case you're living under a rock or you're watching this in the future, I will very quickly go over it just so that we're all on the same page here, so you can understand exactly how the nuances work and everything, right? Currently in set 9.5, the way that the composition works is that right now it is broken as fuck as of patch 13.20a, not B, that's coming out later tonight. But so far it is TF reroll. You roll on 6, try to hit Galio 3, Twisted Fate 3, and then ideally if you can find Vel'Koz 3 as well, that is your ideal secondary carry. You itemize Twisted Fate using the Pandora's items legend, Twisted Fate legend, which allows you to guarantee Pandora's items on 2/1. You get blue buff JG Gunblade, and then you get your Radiant Redemption on Galio thanks to the Demacia trait, and you get a very, very tanky friendly, very, very overtuned tanky backline, and it's just a GG. the thing that people were really hating about this board is that if you actually end up with just like 2 stars, this board, it could potentially top 4. And that's why people have a lot of problems with it, because the board can basically sustain like 4 people at a time. That's the current issue with the board. But nonetheless, if you're able to hit and you're the one that hits everything, you basically win out for free. So that is what we're working with. So let's talk about how he's able to sort of one trick every single game, right? And to understand this, we need to talk a little bit about theory, which is like, it's sort of like some nerd shit, but like, trust me, like if we talk about this first, then once you watch how he plays and approaches the game, you start to realize there is a pattern to the madness. He's not just getting lucky. There is a little more to it, okay? So we're going to talk specifically within the context of TF reroll, but this can apply to not only just rerolls, but even standard 4-cost boards, or even 3-cost reroll, 1-cost reroll, you name it. You have to be able to approach it by understanding your conditions. Basically, you got to understand the composition inside and out. When it comes to TF reroll, the way that I like to view it, or at least separate it when I was VOD reviewing Milk, is that you basically break it up into 3 different conditions, right? You have your perfect conditions, your win streak conditions, and your lose streak conditions. Perfect conditions is like Mort Dog is just blessing your game. Like, everything is perfect. You're playing TF, right? And on 2-1, you're hitting like 2-star Talia, 2-star TF, right? Poppy Bastion frontline, and then you'll be able to tech into it like a Galio plus Demacia at level 5 on like 2-5, right? Like the absolute most ideal, perfect, brain dead, easiest game of your life. That's what I mean by perfect conditions. And this is sort of, anybody could pilot this. A gold player could pilot a game like this. Like it's pretty fucking simple. Maybe not gold, maybe plat. But, you know, at 3-2, your 4 multicasters all are 2-star. You have your level 650 gold, 2-star Galio plus Demacia, and you're slow rolling basically uncontested, right? It's a very simple game, and at 4-2, you're able to basically win out because you get the 3-star Galio and the 3-star TF. You have money to push level 7, you tech and Swain at level 7 for strategists and sorcerers, and it's a GG. This is the most straightforward, brain dead, anybody could play this. But at the very least, you know, at least be able to recognize when your game is going to be basically handed to you for free, okay? Just be able to recognize that this is, again, anybody could understand this, okay? This is what people sort of always default and understand, right? But when they don't get their perfect conditions, this is when people start to struggle when trying to play their 2-cost rerolls, okay? And not even just 2-cost rerolls, but again, any board they're trying to one-trick. And by the way, don't try to one-trick a shitty board. The whole point of one-tricking a board is to play a board that's very strong. And it's like severely, not severely, but definitely overtuned compared to everything else in the current meta, right? That's the idea of one-tricking. Anyways, let's talk about loose streaking first, because I think most people understand loose streaking, but they don't really understand the win streak is actually like the least understood in my opinion, right? So let's talk about loose streaking, loose streak conditions, right? This is sort of, you kind of expect it where it's like, okay, at 2-1, you basically have a shitty opener, you have no upgraded units, you should consider just 5 loose streaking and just trying to build up a lot of economy, okay? This means you're basically trading off all your HP throughout basically all stage 2, trying to get that 5 loss. Then on 3-2, you basically, the goal, at least in this specific condition, is that you are rolling pretty deep using your economic advantage to try to stabilize at this point. You want your 4 multicasters, ideally all 2-star, 2-star Galio plus Demacia, and your board should be stable. Ideally, it can win streak all of stage 3. This is something that you should be seeing, and ideally most of the time if you're trying to lose streak. Now, the problem with this is that you can definitely miss, right? And if you miss on 3-2, you have to just accept that if you're one-tricking, you have to accept your fate there. You have to accept it, because if you miss, like, you have to understand, like, you basically need to stabilize on by 3-2. That's sort of the idea. It's the reason why it's 3-2 specifically, by the way, is because it's a standard interval. It's sort of when people are respiking their boards heavily, but because you are building up your potential for your board strength throughout all of stage 2, this is when you're using up all that potential and then turning it into power for your board. It's very simpler. It's kind of similar analogy wise, like potential energy and kinetic energy, if you know you're following me along there mentally. But I mean, if you're not, don't worry about it. Anyways, but again, ideally 3-2 stabilized, and if you don't, just accept the fact you will probably ball for that game. That is just how it is. Okay, then moving on at 4-2, ideally you want to have your TF 3-star, your Galio 3-star, and then be able to push your levels, and hopefully your HP isn't too bad that you're still able to top 4 within the lobby. This is again the second most understood / common approach when it comes to 2-star 2-cost rerolls specifically. And again, we're talking within the context of 2-cost rerolls. If you're playing a standard board like a 4-cost reroll or 4-cost standard board, the conditions are different, okay? But you have to be able to think about critically within these constraints, right? That is something you need to understand. Again, perfect conditions, loose streak conditions. Most people understand how this works, especially at high elo when it comes to 2-cost reroll. This is these two are like the most well understood. The part that Milk has sort of perfected, that I think people are struggling with, even within GM, even within like low challenger, at least like the lobbies I've been playing in, when it comes to win streak, and your board is win streaking, and you know TF is broken as fuck, especially within the current conditions where it can support 4 players, right? And you know you want to be hitting that TF 2 stars in your multicasters or whatever. So how do you play when you're win streaking? And this is sort of the part that gets people sort of confused. Again, this is within the context, you are one tricking. And I cannot stress this enough. You are one tricking. Your end goal is to play that specific board. When you are win streaking, you are probably not playing TF at 2-1. You're probably playing like a 2-star Cassiopeia, maybe some level of frontline, right? Some very strong frontline, something like a 2-star Bastion frontline, like a 2-star Poppy or whatever, right? And ideally, you level 4 at 2-1, and you can potentially try to streak it out, or at the very least, preserve like the vast majority of your HP when you're win streaking here, right? Sounds good enough. Makes sense. Most people can understand this, right? The idea is you eventually pivot into your board, right? Good. Same page. What about 3-2? I want you to think about this actually. Think about what is the ideal 3-2? What is ideal but also realistic, okay? We know what's ideal. We have the perfect conditions right here, right? But we need to be realistic. If we're win streaking with our board, and this is a bit of a hint. If we are win streaking with our board throughout all of stage 2, how many of those units are we really selling and pivoting into a TF4 multicaster board, right? Is our level 6 board, you know, disregard the 3 costs, are they really gonna look, is it really gonna look like, is our level 6 board gonna look like this if we're win streaking stage 2? Probably not. We're not selling off our units, our strong units, just to pivot into a board where we might even miss trying to hit the upgraded units on our TF board, right? It doesn't make any sense. So on 3-2, consider your ability to maybe be able to maintain tempo with your current board, right? How much do you actually have to roll to be able to keep your streak going? Or rather, even if you're not going to streak, at least stay very healthy, right? What are the odds? Think about it, critically assess it, right? And ideally in this spot within win streak, what is ideal but also basically realistic is, you know, do you have to roll? Like, think about it. How much do you have to roll? Is it required? If you have to at all, maybe you have to roll a little bit to stabilize, but once you're stable, do you really need to level or roll for TF? Like, probably not. So if you're unlikely to bleed out very much, consider trying to push level 7 first, right? Maybe try considering pushing level 7 at like 4-1, maybe even 3-5, depending on how rich you are, right? And by doing so at 4-2, then we can start thinking, okay, now, or maybe even 3-5. So this could actually be at 3-5 or 4-2, right? It depends on how things work, right? But maybe at 3-4, 4-2, then we're sitting at, okay, maybe now we have 4 multicaster and the majority are 2-starred, right? Either push 7 or stay 6 to slow roll at 6 throughout the entirety of stage 3, depending on how contested we are. If we're heavily contested for this TF stuff, maybe we can just keep slow rolling on 6 whilst keeping our strong board on our board. And then eventually, once the pivot makes sense and it's correct because it's our strongest board, then we pivot into the multicasters. Then we switch out our, you know, maybe that Samira 2 that we were playing with, or maybe that you know, that Tarek 2 that we found, right? If it makes sense, then consider doing it, right? Always consider the strength of your board and then be able to keep spiking it. Don't ever pivot into a weaker board. It almost never makes sense, right? And then again, also the final piece of the puzzle, 2-star Galio plus Demacia, right? That is when you sort of pivot into it, and then you can say, okay, now how do I play the game? Do I want to slow roll at 6? Maybe slow roll at 7, right? Now, obviously, some of you might be watching this. You go, well, okay, but what if I hit like a bunch of Vel'Koz? Okay, what if I hit a bunch of Talias? Like, what do I do then, right? Obviously, this is not a perfect template, okay? At the end of the day, this template is sort of a guideline. It's what you can expect a lot of the time, but can you expect every single game? Of course not. You have to still be able to critically assess your position and think like, okay, what do I do in this spot, X spot, whatever, right? But by being able to concretely understand these 3 conditions and then being able to play off of them on the fly in case, like, let's say, for example, like you're doing this like loose streak condition, right? You're doing this loose streak condition. You hit like every multicaster, all of them 2-starred, but you have like 1 TF, right? All your multicasters are 2-starred, your Galio is 2-starred, you found a single J4, right? You're not gonna keep rolling. You're gonna stop. The EV is, it's not efficient for you, sorry. to keep rolling in that scenario, you're gonna want to just say, okay, fuck it. Maybe I play into Vel'Koz 3 instead as my main carry, right? Or maybe I will play into Talia if I find a bunch of Talias instead, right? Consider critically from your spot and assess it, right? But again, by understanding these different conditions, you're able to play off of them and then be able to improvise a little bit without too much brain power, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. And before you go, just to really solidify everything in here, we're going to do a little bit of VOD reviewing. Now, just to really solidify the points, again, we are going to be VOD reviewing like basically a quarter of this game. We're just going to really watch the way that Milk approaches the early game and how that's really able to set him up for success when it comes to playing multicasters and hard forcing a one-trick comp, right? Now, obviously, we're not going to talk too much about it, and we'll probably skip out the vast majority of the end game, but nonetheless, his approach to getting to where he needs to be in order to force the comp is very, very important to watch. 3 gold opener here, and again, we can see we do have the Samira pair here and the Poppy pair. We're already looking at a potential to be playing a very strong win streak board here, depending on what kind of upgrades we're able to find. Bastion units that are very, very strong as well. And actually, funny enough, we are actually inside of Dreaming Pool. So putting the Demacians onto his board here is really, really great. Very prudent. He's able to basically tailor a Galio for free here. Hits the Pandora's items. Galio already sitting on a pair. And, you know, our board isn't like the strongest of boards, but we do have a tier that we do want to hold on to, right? So because we do want to make sure we hold on to the tier here, we're kind of forced to level here in this spot. You could make the argument you could try to lose streak from this spot, but because we aren't able to make 10 off rip, it kind of makes more sense for us to just try to hold the Galio pair here and maybe even hold the Nashes as well, and then try to, you know, maybe not exactly win streak, but we're definitely going to try to mix streak and preserve HP throughout the early game as much as possible. Here, we're actually able to hit the Galio 2 here, and now suddenly from a mixed streaking angle, we're looking at a very, not guaranteed, but definitely a lot more likely to be able to win streak throughout all of stage 2. So here, Galio 2, and you could argue it's a high roll, but again, if you're high rolling or low rolling, you gotta know what to do in these positions, right? So here, he hits the Galio 2 here, and again, we're gonna speed it through up all here. He does obviously win this fight. And again, name of the game, try to preserve a lot of HP here, and ultimately try to win streak throughout all of stage 2. Now, he does find the Cassiopeia here, which is really, really nice. Acts as a very great item holder, not only for the TF, but also because it gives us Invoker. Very solid stuff here, and even though it's a Cassiopeia 1 here, we have a Galio 2 with a Radiant Redemption here, and at the time of recording this, absolutely fucking broken. So glad to see that Cassiopeia is able to still clean up despite the fact that it's Cassiopeia 1 here, and we are able to just clean and stall out because Galio 2 is just Galio 2. Obviously, throughout the carousel, we are playing Pandora's items, so we are trying to find units rather than components because we can always reroll the components. But if we're able to find like a TF or like a Talia or something, then we can just, you know, play into that, right? So here we are trying to greed for the Gunblade as our final item here. We are trying to look for blue buff, Gunblade, and Nash's Tooth for our TF. Not the best of BISs, but nonetheless, it's good enough. Cloak goes onto the Galio here because if you don't remember, Galio really, really likes gargoyles. I don't remember if I talked about that at the very beginning, but nonetheless, we are chilling with this board for basically all of stage 2, and we're able to force streak very, very comfortably, especially with the Alawi 200 board. A lot of beef in the front line. So as you can see here in our spot though, right, we're approaching 3-1-3-2. We only have one Talia, no other multicasters. We're hard forcing TF, no other multicasters, right? And again, this is the part where a lot of people sort of fall trap and victim to their own misunderstanding of how to one trick a comp, right? In this spot at 3-2, obviously we pick an augment that makes sense. Healing Orb is like the best for TF, just, you know, in terms of silver augments here, right? But in this spot, a lot of people will make a mistake, right? They go, hey, TF is contested in this lobby, and we've talked about this before. TF is contested in this lobby. I need to roll down immediately, try to find all the TFs, all the Vel'Kozes, or whatever, right? But again, Milk is a very smart player. He says, hey, wait a minute, that's Silco. It's a Silco with 3 items on stage 3, and I have like a very strong front line that can help support it, right? So Milk says, hey, fuck rolling, knowing how contested and congested the line can be. What he's going to do instead is just slam the items here, all of them onto Silco here, because this is basically BIS for TF. I mean, JG over Nashers, but we've talked about it already. And just tempo. Our board is strong. The amount of gold it would have taken us to try to hit the TFs and the Sonas and the Vel'Koz and whatever, it's just too much. No TFs, no Vel'Kozes in this spot, right? How in the hell are we going to find it, right? We know it's contested as well. It's going to take us forever. So instead, we're just going to try to play within our econ here. And then if the game was balanced, maybe we would pivot, right? The game's not balanced though, so we're going to hard force TF. But because we're hard forcing TF and we know the line is congested, so we can see as our opponent is also sent it to 0 gold, trying to hit all the shit, right? And again, it's a common mistake across players of all skill ranges, even within Challenger, right? You don't want to pivot too fast because now you have 0 econ, you won't be able to hit all your units, you're gonna struggle quite a bit. And yes, the line is congested, but that doesn't mean you have to send it down unless you absolutely need to, right? Obviously, they had a lose streak open, that's why they're 65 HP, right? So obviously, they didn't have to send it down, that was their Hail Mary, they didn't have a choice, right? But for Milk's spot in particular, and this is why win streak is better than lose streaking in general, he has the option to say, hey, I'm just going to keep slow rolling here, and then eventually I will find my units, and I can tech into the 2-star version of everything on the multicaster board that I would like to play, and then the 3 stars will come by eventually once the other players start to bleed out, and then the units get thrown back into the pool. That is the whole approach here, right? So again, I'm going to speed up the VOD a little bit because there's not much else to talk about. He does end up going with double gargoyles on Galio, which is kind of an interesting decision. I don't know if I fully agree with it, but nonetheless, Milk is a better player than me, so whatever. As you can see here, again, slow rolling, just keeping 50, and we're not in a rush, right? We have a strong board. We have the Soraka for Invoker and the Targon with the Bastions, with the Taric and the Poppy, right? Strong board. We don't have to pivot so soon. And as you can see here, we basically made it throughout all stage 3, win streaking the majority of this, right? It wasn't all of it, but it was definitely the majority, right? We finally find our first TF, which is really, really cool. We are sitting on 7 Gallios here, but eventually, as we can see here, Milk will eventually start to pivot his board here. And ideally, we do want to try to find this TF2 at this point. Sure, if the game was balanced, we would try to pick up the Silco pair here and try to play around Silco, but the game is not balanced. Don't act like the game is balanced. You know it's not. So try to lead strong lines whenever you can. And as we can tell, Milk is basically 1 TF2 away from pivoting his whole board. So now we're at 4-1 here. And again, our board is strong. It's not perfect, but we should expect to start to see more losses here. It's not the best of boards, but nonetheless, as you can tell, it's still a strong board and we're still able to win at 4-1. Obviously, pick a really strong augment here. And again, we want to roll here. And ideally at this point, we do want to find at least TF2. Because we do know that we do want to pivot the board. So we are rolling here, and he eventually finds it, and now knows to just pivot everything here. It's 4-2. We have a TF2, Vel'Koz 2, Sona 2, Tilia 2, and it's almost as if we hit this board at 3-2, but then we just kept slow rolling, and we just missed on TF, and then we just found a bunch of Gallios, right? You understand what I'm saying here? He's now situated himself in a position where he can just play the board out, just normally, contest everybody else, but compared to all these other, like, knuckleheads in the lobby, Milk is sitting on a bunch of economy and a bunch of HP. All right, now like I said before, there is no reason to keep watching the game. We know how it plays out. He slow rolls on 6, eventually finds his units, then eventually goes to 7, techs into Swain, right? And then he's sitting on a very, very strong multicasted board. As we can see, based off the VOD here, as soon as this fight is over, I'll speed it up a little bit here. He is sitting on a TF3, Sona 3, finally hits the Vel'Koz 3 at stage 7-3, and is able to play with the Galio 3 as well. He has a bunch of multicasters upgraded, basically the strongest board in the game here. And my man's chilling. His spot is insane. Obviously, though, the other person is kind of high roll out of their mind. RE2, 6 Ionia, 4 Vanquishers with a timer 2 as well, right? Probably the most capped out you can get in terms of Ionia Vanquishers here. And with a bit of fight RNG, actually wins out and Milk ends in a second. Nonetheless, though, still, even though he was like, as we can look in the fucking lobby as well, he was at least one-way contested, at least throughout the early stages. I believe somebody else actually was also playing TF, and then they pivoted out because they were trying to tempo with it, and then they swapped out. But nonetheless, he was basically 2-3-way contested the majority of this game, and even though that was the case, he was still able to end second in the lobby. Anyways, I hope that example was helpful. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions about one-tricking or whatever, don't ask me. Go to Milky Streams and ask him, okay? Anyways, sounds good. I mean, you can ask in the comments. I don't know how insightful I'll be. I'm not great at one-tricking, but nonetheless, take care, guys. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you all later. Happy climbing.